In the small village of Kanyangu, tucked away in the rolling hills of a random African country, the air was thick with the excitement of an upcoming event. The village, known for its red earth roads, sun-drenched mango trees, and resilient people, was about to embark on a bold venture, a grand water project that promised to bring life-giving water to every home. For years, the villagers had struggled with inadequate water supply. The old well in the center of the village had dried up during the dry season, and the river nearby was barely a trickle. The people of Kanyangu, though hardy, were beginning to feel the burden of their endless walks to distant rivers and springs. Water scarcity was not just a burden, it was a daily fight for survival. It was during one of these scorching afternoons that a stranger arrived in the village. His name was Gerald, a self-proclaimed water consultant, with an air of confidence and a briefcase full of brochures and fancy diagrams. Gerald wasn't from the area. In fact, he wasn't from anywhere in particular, he was simply a wanderer who had seen an opportunity in the villagers' desperation. He gathered the village leaders, Chief Kibugu, an aging man with a reputation for being wise, and Mwikali, the energetic village teacher who had a reputation for talking too much. Together, they stood in front of the excited crowd, eager to hear what Gerald had to offer. "Dear villagers," Gerald began, clearing his throat dramatically, "I have come to solve your water problems, and I will do so in grand fashion. You will never have to carry water from the river again. I promise you that." The crowd, already thirsty for solutions, leaned in, their ears wide open. Gerald spoke with such authority, his voice smooth and convincing. "I have a plan," he continued. "A modern water system that will bring water directly to your homes. No need for wells, no more trekking miles to fetch water. It's all within your reach, thanks to my expertise." Mwikali, always ready to challenge anyone with new ideas, raised an eyebrow. "But how is this possible, Gerald? We don't have the resources for such a project." Gerald flashed her a smile that was more of a smirk. "Oh, don't worry about that, Mwikali. I have the connections. I've been involved in similar projects across the region, and trust me, we can get this done with a little bit of faith and," he paused dramatically, "a lot of commitment." And so, in that moment, something strange happened. The villagers, blinded by their desperation for water and their belief in the stranger's polished words, agreed to Gerald's plan without fully understanding the costs or the reality of what it would entail. Gerald's proposal was simple. He promised that, with the help of the villagers, he would construct a complex water pipeline system that would stretch across Kanyangu, tapping into an underground water source that only he seemed to know about. In exchange, the villagers would contribute a portion of their savings, work together in building the infrastructure, and, of course, remain fully committed to the project. Chief Kibugu, although cautious, was convinced by Gerald's charisma and the promise of a better life. Mwikali, ever the optimist, was also swayed. The rest of the village, eager for change, followed suit. They pooled their resources, handed over their savings, and began the arduous task of digging trenches for the pipes, despite not having a clear understanding of the technicalities involved. The villagers worked day and night, lifting heavy pipes, mixing concrete, and laying down the foundations for the system. Yet, despite their tireless efforts, something felt off. Gerald had promised them the moon, but there were always new excuses as to why things weren't progressing. The consultant would arrive at the site in his fancy clothes and shiny shoes, offering nothing more than vague reassurances. "It's coming along beautifully," he would say. "A little more work, and soon you'll have all the water you need." But as the weeks turned into months, the villagers began to notice something alarming. The water system wasn't working. The pipes, which were supposed to be carrying fresh water, sat empty. The trenches remained unfinished, and the workers' hopes began to fade. Gerald, always busy with important meetings, seemed to disappear when things were at their most critical. One scorching afternoon, as the villagers gathered for another meeting in front of the half-built pipeline, they could no longer hold their frustration in. Mawikali, who had grown increasingly suspicious of Gerald's empty promises, stood up and addressed the crowd. "Something is not right here," she began. "We've worked day and night, given our savings, and yet there is no water. Gerald told us he was an expert, but we've seen no progress. What happened to all the money? Why are we still thirsty?" The villagers murmured in agreement, their faces clouded with doubt and anger. The leader of the women's group, Mama Nia, stood up next. "Gerald's words were sweet, but our stomachs are empty. Our children are still carrying water from the river while we toil in vain." At that moment, the crowd turned their eyes toward Chief Kibugu. The old man had been silent for a long time, but now, with a heavy heart, he spoke. "The problem isn't just that Gerald is a fool," he said, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "It's that we underestimated the power of stupid people in large numbers. We were so eager for a solution, so desperate to believe that we overlooked the obvious. We put our trust in someone who only saw us as an opportunity." The villagers began to realize that the true issue wasn't just Gerald's incompetence or dishonesty. It was their own overcommitment to an idea without fully understanding the risks. They had been swept up in the promise of easy solutions without taking the time to question the details. Gerald wasn't the only one to blame. Their desperation had led them to invest too much in a plan that was doomed from the start. As the realization set in, the villagers were filled with a mix of anger, embarrassment, and regret. They had overcommitted themselves, not just financially, but emotionally, believing that one person's empty promises could fix everything. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. In the weeks that followed, the villagers began to take matters into their own hands. They abandoned the unfinished project and instead decided to come together to dig their own well, one that was much smaller, but far more practical and manageable. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was theirs. They understood the process, and they worked together with what they had. Though the water situation didn't improve overnight, the villagers of Kanyangu learned to be more cautious and discerning. They no longer rushed into grand schemes without fully understanding the implications. They learned that in their quest for progress, they should never underestimate the power of stupid people in large numbers, and, perhaps even more importantly, the importance of questioning the promises of outsiders who offered too much and delivered too little. And so, in the end, the village thrived not because of the grand water system that Gerald had promised, but because the people of Kanyangu learned the true meaning of self-reliance and the dangers of overcommitment. It wasn't always easy, but they would never again fall for the allure of easy solutions, especially when they came from someone who had nothing more than empty words to offer. If you find this video helpful and motivational, please like, share and subscribe to my YouTube, TikTok and Facebook page platform. You will find the links in the description of the video below. Thanks for watching and let's meet in our next video.